Good morning, friends. Welcome. This lodge meets here at 4865A Cordell Avenue, Suite 230, Bethesda, Maryland, 20814. Every Sunday at 11 o'clock, we, the students in the Washington, D.C. area, come here to have discussions on the wisdom of the ages as presented by and through the masters of wisdom. We follow the program of the United Lodge of Theosophists, the Declaration, which is here on the back of our program. The policy of this lodge is independent devotion to the cause of Theosophy without professing attachment to any theosophical organization. It is loyal to the great founders of the Theosophical movement, but does not concern itself with dissensions or differences of individual opinion. The work it has on hand and the end it keeps in view are too absorbing and too lofty to leave it the time or inclination to take part in side issues. That work and that end is the dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of Theosophy and the exemplification and practice of those principles through a truer realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. It holds that the unassailable basis for union among Theosophists, wherever and however situated, the similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching, and therefore has neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers, the sole bond between its associates being that basis. And it aims to disseminate that idea among Theosophists in the furtherance of unity. It regards as Theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization. And it welcomes to its association all those who are in accord with its declared purposes and who desire to fit themselves by study and otherwise to be the better able to help and teach others. The true Theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all. Today's reading is from the Voice of the Silence, starting on page 70. No conqueror of sins, once that Sawani hath crossed the seventh path, all nature thrills with joyous awe and feels subdued. The silver star now twinkles out the news to the night blossoms. The streamlet to the pebbles ripple out the tail. Dark ocean waves roar it to the rocks, surf-bound. Scent-laden breezes sing it to the vales. And stately pines mysteriously whisper, a master has arisen, a master of the day. He standeth now like a white pillar to the west, upon whose face the rising sun of thought eternal poureth forth his first glorious waves. His mind, like a fecund and boundless ocean, spreadeth out in shoreless space. He holdeth life and death in his strong hand. Yea, he is mighty, the living power made free in him, that power which is himself, can raise the tabernacle of illusion high above the gods, above great Brahm and Indra. Now he shall surely reach his great reward. Shall he not use the gifts which it confers for his own rest and bliss, his well-earned weal and glory, he, the subduer of the great delusion? Nay, O thou candidate for nature's hidden lure, if one would follow in the steps of holy, if of Amitabha, the boundless age, thou wouldst become co-worker, then must thou shed the light acquired, like to the Bodhisattvan twain, upon the span of all three worlds. And now for today's talk on the New Year.
Good morning. Happy New Year. There is a time for everything. There is a time for everything, King Solomon. And a season for every activity under the heavens. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to tear down and a time to build. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to scatter stones and a time to gather them. A time to embrace and a time to give up. A time to keep and a time to throw away. A time to tear and a time to mend. A time to be silent and a time to speak. A time to love and a time to hate. A time for war and a time for peace. How do we know what is the time for what? Do we just go with our heart's desire and what feels right? And with this, I want to come to the doctrine of the cycles, the fundamental law of periodicity given in the Secret Doctrine as a second fundamental. Everything happens in a cycle. There are grand cycles and there are small cycles. There are great cosmic and universal cycles. There is a day and there is a night of Brahma. There are times when things come into existence, and there are times when universe contracts and things are not in existence. The same applies at a macro, same at a micro level. There are microcycles in nature and there are microcycles in our life. There are times when nature comes to expansion, and there are times when nature comes to contraction, and there are times of stasis when nothing happens. So those are the three key stages of cycle. There is an expansion, there is a contraction, and there is stasis. And we often wrongfully believe that expansion is when the nature comes to full bloom, when there is a summertime, when the nature produces the fruits of its labor. But in fact, the cycles are governed by the greatest God of all, the great source, the sun. Because the sun is the one that determines the beginning of the cycles and the periodicity of the cycle. So I would like to go now to the cycle of the sun that begins at the winter solstice. So this is the beginning of the growth, the beginning of expansion, that will end at Easter. So this is where the energy, the astral light of the earth is young and expanding and growing. So this is the time of ultimate expansion and growth that gives the momentum to whatever happens in that cycle of expansion, of growth. And with this, I want to say a few words about what does it mean to be in flow with that cycle. That, of course, the energetic field of the earth and life can be expanding, meanwhile we can be contracting. I would like to compare this to wave. There are waves, and like every surfer would know, the moment of catching the wave, being on the wave. Because when you catch that wave, it propels you and gives you that momentum, the motion of going further. Or you cannot catch it and you ultimately end up face down in the water. So the catching that expansion, being in the wave, being in the sync with the universal energy and with the Earth's energy, is what gives us that momentum to achieve the most from what we are set to achieve in life, in this year, in this day. And being in sync with the wave, that would give the momentum. And by the being in sync with the wave, what is that universal wave? We often believe that we break down into the droplets of water, but that universal wave is unity. It is the universal unity that is indivisible. And even the momentum of expansion and growth, we decide to break out in our little droplet of water, we're definitely not catching the wave. Because the wave is the universal flow of unity. So this is indicative from basically around December 21st, from the winter solstice until Easter, there is that expansion when we can really achieve the most with what we try to do and putting our intentions. And the new year is a marker that sets the boundary between the two. It's not one day. We tend to believe it is just one day, but in fact there is the winter solstice, there is December 25th, that is the date of the birth of God, so to say. There is the December 1st, and there is the Theosophical New Year of January 4th. So when we set ourselves in this period, and it is a continuum, this is where if we put ourselves in that state of unity and a mindset of a flow with the universal energy, where we can really aspire to the most. And with this, I want to talk a little bit more about the January itself and the concept of January and the old Roman god Janus. It's a little bit a small picture. But it's interesting to see that Janus was the one governing the zodiac, and this is the January derived from the god Janus. And he is the god of two faces. His one face is looking at the past, and his other face is looking into the future. What is interesting, that we often hear that there is only now, there is only this moment. But he does not have the face looking at now, looking at us. And from the way he looks, he's completely impartial to whatever happened in the past and to whatever is happening in the future. The interpretation of past and the future, once again, there is no time. There is just eternal presence with the cycles of periodicity in it. But when we look at the time and our division of time, now is the moment when we create past and we create future. So now is both future and the past. And when you look at the god Janus looking at the past and the future, he is not determining now. So who is here, who is determining now? That's ultimately us. That's what we came here to do, what we came to achieve, and we can create the impartial past and the future that we are creating. But to blame any gods for creation of our past or the future would be foolish. It is ultimately us and our state and where we are, whether we are riding the wave of unity or we are splitting in our own water drops. That's what determines our past and the future, and in a way our karma, because karma, this is what is driving our future. But karma is not some independent mechanism. It is what we are creating. So in every present moment, we are creating our past that we will look at. And in every present moment, we're creating our future, because with the karma we created, it will be propelling us forward. And why this period of the new year is so important, because this is where it's almost like the energy is hypersensitive. Whatever you put into the universe at this time, it would literally multiply and be reinforced tenfold. This is not the same in other energetic cycles of the earth. And it's interesting that there are many beliefs and maybe even superstitions that the way you spend New Year, that's how your year will go. Well, it is a superstition, but under each superstition, there is some reason why people believe this. And basically, they believe the way you spend your New Year, that's how the year will turn out, is a little bit narrowed, but the way you spend this period from December 21st into Easter, the intentions, the efforts, the aspirations you put in that period, that will be carried forward for the rest of the year. And now, so when you can expand it to your whole life periodicity, there are also periods in life when you are putting those efforts that later bringing the results. So this period is very important in what mindset and what intentionality you bring forth. And that's the reason Janus is really impartial, because the cycles are here, the energy is here, the laws of karma are here, but at the end it is us who are creating this reality and creating our reality and creating the universal reality. We are the ultimate creators in the cycles. Now, it is also interesting to note that January is governed by Capricornus, and this is the constellation of Kumaras. And we know that the Kumaras are the ones who lit our mind. So literally, this period is lighting of the mind. It's lighting of our not only intellect, but our both higher mind, of how we want to proceed with our individual lives on this earth, and how we want to create the universal unity and universal brotherhood and move forward in the timelessness. It is also interesting to note that this period is always been noted as the period of birth, so going from the Kumaras of January, of Capricornus, going back to December, it was the period of birth of God. But who is really being born in December? Roman. In December, the ultimate birth is birth of the sun. It is the winter solstice. It's the beginning of the expansion of the solar cycle and beginning of the expansion of our the astral energy of the earth and all of our consciousness. So it's literally birth of the sun and the cycle. And it's interesting to note that, of course, we know December 25th as Christmas, but there are also a number of other gods that have been born around the same time. And just to list the few, that was Persian Mitra, that was Egyptian Osiris, the Greek Bacchus, Phoenician Adonai, and Phrygian Athis. So it's how interesting that all of the births of the gods was placed around that time, and definitely it has more of a cyclical, more of the energetic background and reasons for that, because they are the ultimate, the definition was it's the birth of the Savior. And this is ultimately the cycle of that energetic birth and basically birth of the ultimate, so to say, God Solus. So what do we do with this period, and what does Secret Doctrine say about it, and what Ms. Blavatsky wrote about it? And I took one quote and I will read it exactly, and it for me it was very, very spoke to me, because it was not a commonly heard one. But it was very interesting, and I'll try to interpret it in the way I understood it. So in this period, she calls us to dare, to will, to achieve, and keep silent. And that from the first adept of our fifth race down to the last Rosenkreuz. It is clear why we want to dare and to will and to achieve in that period, because that propels us like the surfer further and further in the energetic cycle. That gives us the biggest momentum. But why keeping silent? And what does it mean, keep silent? It's very much spoke to the student, because keeping silent is not interpreting what the world should be, what others should do, but truly leading by our own example. If we do stay in the wave of unity and keep that consciousness of indivisible wave and not the droplet of our individual interests, and just live in that flow, there is no need to speak, to convince, to preach, to blame, to judge. That is being silent. Just living that truth of unity and in a way giving it full force in this period, and not speaking too much of what should or would or not, because that is bringing division. Because what is not or should not or is not is already a division. So that was a very interesting statement. And now I also want to note that the Theosophical New Year is actually January 4th, not 1st. So those who missed their resolutions on January 1st still have till January 4th. And here is what is said about the Theosophical New Year. Now read it exactly from HPB. It is January the 4th, which ought to be selected by Theosophists, the esoterics especially, as their new year. January is under the sign of Capricornus, and already spoke about that. The mysterious Makara of the Hindu mystics, the Kumaras, is being stated, having incarnated in mankind under the 10th sign of the zodiac. For ages, the 4th of January has been sacred to Mercury Buddha, thus Hermes. Thus everything combines to make of it a festival to be held by those who study ancient wisdom. Whether called Bud or Budi by its Aryan name, Mercurius, the son of Coelus and Hecate, truly or of the divine, and the Inferno magic by its Hellenic, or again Hermes or Thoth, its Greco-Egyptian name. The day seems in every way more appropriate for us than January 1st. The day of Janus, the double-faced god of the time servers. Yet it is well named and as well chosen to be celebrated by all the political opportunists the world over. And going back to Janus that was just mentioned, Janus is the keeper of the gates. He is the keeper of the past, and he is keeper of the future. He is also keeper of all exits and all entrances. He is keeper of transitions. So ultimately, this is the time of only the acceleration of our intentions, but of change. If we intend any kind of change in our lives or in the lives of the community, city, nation, universe, this is the time to initiate that change. So what is this time? Going back to there is a time for everything. It is time to be born. And this is where the gods of humanity were born in this period. It is time to plant, to seed the new ideas, to start the new ventures, because they will be carried forward by the astral light of the earth, the energy that's present at this moment. It is a time to build. Once again, if we build in the spirit of unity, it will be supported by the universal wave that is taking momentum in this period. It is time to scatter stones, and it's time to gather them. It does depend on your own life cycle, where you are at this moment. It is time to mend, and that's what often the holiday season is, when families come together, when people stop the wars. That was actually the case with during the First World War, where over the Christmas there was a ceasefire and war ended, and then it was hard to understand why it has to begin again. So it is time to mend, and it's time for peace. And with that, I will conclude calling everyone to start this new year with those intentions. And I'll be happy to answer any questions about anything we've covered.
Are you familiar with the film company from Europe named Janos that makes academic films?
I've heard about it. Yes, I've heard about it. Because Janos is... I spoke just a little bit about Janos, but there is much more to his or her character, because there is a Janos, the masculine side, and there is Jana, the feminine side. And Janos is really bringing the duality together. That's bringing past and future, bringing feminine, bringing masculine. It is the gateway of transitions, so it's very interesting that you mentioned that there's actually an educational company with that image.
You say January 4th as the preferred date for the, if I heard well, the Theosophical year. But given that the calendar moves and has been changed, and who knows exactly where is the right beginning or end, what is the relevance for separating it from the, I guess, official calendar, New Year, which is, I guess, January 1st?
To complicate it further, there is actually January 1st, January 3rd that has significance, and the January 4th. I tend to look at this as the period from the solstice to the Easter, where we are carried and propelled forward with the energy of the earth. But the reference to the force is due to the dates of the zodiac and the sign of the Capricornus that was selected for that reason. But I don't know. That's something for the research. Maybe Tunjai knows. This is a deep mystery.
Well, she didn't say it's the right time for everyone, did she?
No.
She said especially esotericists,
Yes.
which means that those of us who study esoteric wisdom, invisible wisdom, which is what Theosophy is all about, what she brought into the world. And if you want to you said to stay with the wave, well, what do you think she brought into the world is a question. Did she not bring a wave, perhaps a channel for us to be able to teach to the root? And who would be the root? All these questions have to be answered by each individual, but the introduction said this is the master's program. They brought it out into the world for the benefit of humanity. Do we perceive that in ourselves, for instance? Do you perceive their presence? Because all these lodges are under their protection. So that channel or energy or current, electrical current, is like that wave. So if we are actually studying the old wisdom, which is the esoteric wisdom, because the secret doctrine, even though is written black on white, has an underlying meaning that each student gets to through that unity exercise in life, plus all of the inner faculties that germinate in each of us automatically as a result of following that unity of nature, plus brotherhood of nature, plus exhibiting that, as you said, in our own lives. So that's intuition, that inner faculty germinates, and then you perceive things at a different and deeper level, which is what your friend does.
And something else that the student read in preparation was the importance of numerology in occultism. That we are basically governed by the numbers. And there was a big significance given to the number 4. And that was not in relation to the 4th of January, but it was examination of the 1889 year, where Blavatsky wrote the article. And the number 4 was the ultimate balance and harmony among human beings. It was noted for the harmony between people. So it is just us looking at number 4, it is divisible. It's a pure balance of 2 and 2. It's maybe a balance of duality brought into unity. There are many ways to interpret it. So when we look at the dates that being brought to us in the Theosophical writings, there is also need to look deeper from the numerological standpoint and understand the meaning of the numbers, because the numbers are incredibly important in occultism and in any esoteric studies.
Okay. No, go ahead first.
I believe in the beginning of the Secret Doctrine, she writes about the numbers, and the 4 is the cube of the Orthodox. And is there some way to tie that into the Orthodox celebration of Christmas at the 6th of January?
Very interesting observation, because now there's not only 1st, there's 3rd, there's 4th, and there's 6th. So, as much as I know about the Orthodox January 6th, it was due to the difference in the calendars. But there can be also some numerological meaning to the number 6. It's also perfectly divisible and balanced, but I do not know about the number 6. I know about the number 9. This is the upcoming year 2019, and number 9 is not the easy number.
It repeats itself.
It repeats itself.
It's pernicious.
It is a number that is materialistic, that is very earthly, and that it's a tricky number. So we'll see what the year brings us.
Yeah.
I had an observation. December 21st is something that can be observed because that's the sun. So whether the year is shifted every certain number of years, there's an adjustment. December 28th, February 28th, 29th, that's one, and then there's another one. But when the solstice is a position of the sun relative to the earth, right? So the distance between that in days to the 4th is what remains constant. So
Yeah.
I'm just wondering why that distance. What is that? What is the relevance? Because you're talking about a wave. You're talking about a cycle. You're talking about the beginning, and then you're saying that the beginning is not really that close to the December 21st, but a little bit farther.
The beginning is at the solstice. It is governed completely by the cycle of the sun, and it continues until around Easter, basically that period of the growth of the sun. Then the sun will start declining. So the sun is governing the energetic field of the earth, the astral light of the earth, and that probably also, when you look at any ancient religions from Egyptians to Mayans, there was this focus on the sun, because it does govern cycles. Tunja was trying to...
But you didn't, I did not quite hear the spiritual sun mentioned. That this sun is just a representation of what is behind it, which is the central spiritual sun.
Yes.
And HPB says this sun is just a window open into that eternal reality, that its function is controlled by that divine sun behind it. So we need to remember that this sun really does not control anything, just the physical aspect of life, but what's behind it controls all of the energies,
Yes.
psychic, spiritual, and intellectual.
Yes, yes, most definitely. Because when I mentioned the Solus as the great god, certainly not the orbit in the sky. It was the
Well, it has a
spiritual side.
function,
Yeah.
but it's controlled at the archaic level, says the secret doctrine, by the central spiritual sun, which is the energy you talked about that comes into the world through this physical sun for our physical growth and development. And January 4th is really important because it was sacred to Thoth Hermes. And if you read the secret doctrine about the zodiac, Hermes is equivalent to Libra or Libra, which is what? It's the Metatron. It establishes equilibrium.
Very interesting.
And it's wisdom. So,
This is, I think all of what you said is why Mr. Judge said, good deed done or anything done in a positive way, perhaps in a negative way too, but in a positive way has a tenfold impact, and it is in any other time of the year.
Yes, yes, very much so. And as I was mentioning, it has this tenfold impact because you are right now in the wave of the positive expansion, and if you are going into negative, it will have a tenfold effect backwards. That you're really, if you are into negative in this period of time, you're so much not in sync where the universal energy in a way going that it does hurt more than any other time.
Yeah. That's why it's so important to be aware of the crest of the cycles.
Yeah. Yes, it's exactly, if you're trying, if there is a wave and you're trying to start when the wave is over, it's not going to be a good result.
I have a question. Mr. Judge, in many of his writings, states the fact that we should be relaxed or lackadaisical about our lives. And you talked about planning. Can you correspond those two statements for us?
I think it is putting the intention and then letting go of desire for the outcome. That's, I think, what Mr. Judge meant. It's not trying to control and pre-plan every moment of life, but setting intention and then letting the energy carry it forward, because often we don't know where it's being carried. We don't know all of the sort of all the play of karma that will take place, and in a way overly planning is a waste of time because we don't know. But putting that intent, planting the seed, and then being open to what may come and flexible with that, that's what they ultimately, I think that's what was meant by his statement. Roman.
If you're surfing on a wave, is it that you become one with the wave? Or is it a danger to confuse yourself with the wave and then you crash?
Well, it's understanding that we are already one with the wave. It's misunderstanding that we are not one, and that's where we crash.
To realize that we're one with the wave.
Yes.
When I was studying engineering,
Can you please speak up?
yeah, as a
Thank you.
student of engineering, one of the most difficult analysis was of a surfer, because of the different forces, physical forces that come into play to maintain the desire of riding the wave. And so many things that can go wrong, and I guess successful riders, surfers, have to keep that in a sort of muscle memory, because they cannot just sit and calculate as we do in paper the forces of the wave moving. It has a mass, the gravity, the momentum, all that come into play to keep that in balance. So becoming one with a wave as a surfer is not easy.
Same, becoming one with all the life forces of all the universal forces. But you probably know that the most successful sports people or even scientists, they become one with whatever they're doing. That with that separation, you're starting to think about the object, not being
With it.
with it.
Yes, that's what's called flow state.
Yeah.
It's when you become one with the activity you're involved in, and you lose your sense of self and time, and you become one with the activity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because if you have to calculate how to ride the wave, you'll never get to the riding. Once you know you are and you just feel that flow and you do not divide, and that's just a metaphor. We're really speaking about our life here with each other and with everything around us. Nature, people, solar system and beyond.
Yeah, they also say that even the cyclones and tsunamis have a center that is absolutely quiet. There's a story where this person actually went to the center and was saved, and all the rest just disappeared.
The eye of the storm.
That's being in you can be even in unity with the storm, and that's I think a very good
The source.
yeah, with the source of the.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's a metaphor I think for many of us who are going through our life storms
Yeah,
to get into unity with that and
absolutely.
not struggle with it.
We all have different issues,
Yeah.
but they are a storm,
Yes.
and some storms are so strong it carries us with it. Yes, you're right.
That was a very good one. I think that will be
Yeah.
at least for me a good guidance for the year.
Yeah. But since you're putting this effort forth during the season, for instance, a lot of people want to lose weight. I'm in the opposite direction, but a lot of people want to lose weight. Well, if it's just an idea in your head and you don't really have a program to follow, in my mind, you would not really practically lose the weight because the desire principle has not been put into practice. For instance, if you don't cut your portions, for instance, or take cakes and fatty things out of your diet, or make a life change by exercising and doing what is necessary, in my mind, you will never lose the weight. So you said that putting a plan into place is also necessary to the degree that you can follow it. I think that's practically true, is it not?
Yeah, because we are on the physical realm unless we deal with it physically and make the change.
Yes.
Right, positively, and make that change. I don't think what you want to bring forth, whether it is personal or communal or universal, will come about.
Then you're just a dreamer. Dreaming is good, but
To build on that, it takes discipline to achieve your goals. And discipline might not be a very popular word these days in our society, but if we get that right, say in the practice of yoga and diet and exercise and meditation, we can achieve our goal of well-being.
And all this does center on will and motive. That's what I'm trying to read.
yeah, that was the last words. Or dare to will to achieve and keep silent. There is a will. You have to put the willpower and commitment. And there is dreaming. I dare to believe that this can be done. Will is action. You have to place that action, and achieve is following through and the commitment to do things, and then keep silent.
But what you have read actually is the neophytes' struggle to get on the path. That's the statement you just read. But it doesn't mean that the struggle is not there in our lives every day, but it does describe the neophyte, because she says in that same article where that came from that your trials will be so very difficult from the personality's viewpoint that you're going to say, this has no merit. I'd rather just go back to what I was doing before I put this program into place.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people, unfortunately, they drop off the edge because of the difficulties we face on the path
Mm-hmm.
of getting on it, or however, wherever it is, or however we are doing it. Everybody has their own trials, but it becomes so overwhelming at some time that you want to say, I'm done with it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's why she says you have to dare, because if there's an abyss and you don't jump, or if the weather is too hot and you can't swim and you're scared to go into the seashore, she says you're going to succumb to the heat or the darkness of the abyss. But if you jump, if you dare to jump, what's on the other side is light. It's very succinct way of expressing it,
Mm-hmm.
but it has tremendous meaning, I think.
Mhm.
That art.
Yes, it was very powerful.
Yeah, it's
Very
very
powerful.
powerful.
Yes. Well, yeah. I think that's an improvement over Nietzsche's statement about looking into the abyss. If you look long enough, the abyss looks back at you. But if you make the leap of faith that there's light, you can jump over the abyss.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that takes daring.
Yes.
It really does take
Yes.
daring, and tremendous amount of daring. And a lot of us are earthbound. We're kind of settled in certain ways and don't want to jump.
Yes.
We become settled in a lifestyle or whatever little things we're doing, but when the trial comes, it yanks you right out of your comfort zone and puts you in a different zone.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, don't be scared, just go,
You go.
dare to go with it.
Yeah, that their statement very much brought back to my mind the faith or belief of Christian church that we often find not that appealing. Like you can't just live on belief. You need to have facts. You need to know what's happening. But I think what was really meant and what that dare here brings to is the ultimate knowledge of the state of unity, whatever you're in with, and it's belief beyond doubt. And from that, you can start putting more practical and analytical and factual interpretation of reality or whatever your actions in this reality are. But if you're coming from the state of belief that there is the abyss, there is me, and I'm going to crash, then once again a comparison, but
I think it comes from vicarious atonement. You're relying on something external to yourself, some power that is going to come and save you. Whereas you explain that we are the makers,
yes,
we are the savers, we are the destroyers.
yes, he's not looking at us.
I think like the idea of cycles really brings the point home. We have to do it, but if we do it in the right season, if you will, or the right time, and with the correct intention, we have to have faith, of course, you mentioned that, but faith alone won't do it either. You have to really activate that process, and then we go into belief based on what? It's got to be based on wisdom, facts, and that's why we have this. There's this program that we study the literature and we compare it internally ourselves to what we have intuitive factors.
Yes, yeah, and there is a reason.
It's a constant sifting process.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, you know, we jump off the abyss, if we will, and sometimes we fail, but we don't really fail because we've learned something by doing it.
And there is a cycle.
Yeah.
That it will come back.
Right.
And that's why I started with the law of cycles, law of periodicity. It is so critically important, and it's something that we in our 21st century so much disconnected, that we live in our own cycle of time, work, existence. We're completely disconnected from the nature cycles or the cosmic cycles. But the moment we stop and look at it, like someone can say, well, why this period is special? Any period is special. I don't believe that there is any special energy. When you watch the ocean, are you going to jump when in between the waves? No, the waves come at the periodicity, and we don't govern them. So instead of just thinking that we create our own cycle of existence now, just to watch the cycles of nature, watch the cycles of the cosmos. They're there for us, and it's up to us to benefit from them or just sort of get lost in our new technological world that's not connected to cycles.
Right. So you have to make a leap of faith.
Leap of faith.
But not blind faith.
Yes.
That's why it comes into honest
And-
understanding all
And
that.
as I read, there is a time to scatter. There is a time to give up. There's time for everything. But it's not the ultimate end. There are cycles. After the time you give up, after the time you kill, after the time you tear, there will be time to mend. And not to forget that whatever negative is happening, whatever when you feel, I give up, I didn't make it, I didn't know, this is not the end. It's just the completion of the cycle.
Yes, but even the universe destroys and rebuilds. The destruction comes because it has to bring about change. And if you look at the historical 2,000 years and follow humanity's progression, you can see the repetition of the cycles. And in one of her articles, or its judges, I'm not sure who wrote that one, or maybe later on, it says that the United States has lived in 200 years what the Roman Empire did in 2,000 years, because this is Kali Yuga and everything is speeded up. And this is a transition age. Everything is in fluctuation for humanity. So all of the truths that secret doctrine contains is a very small portion of the whole. And not only that, there are links that are missing in it that each student has to fit in. In other words, they don't give it, is what I'm getting at. Because this is a transition age, and they want to be sure as to what we're doing with it before you get to it.
Yep.
All of it. Yeah.
So I think
So
that
all this, what I'm thinking about is from the broader perspective, nature, I've read that nature exists for the benefit of humanity, for us to learn from. And as we learn, we also influence the next age. We're in Kali Yuga now. The Golden Age is the next age we're going to experience.
and
we're going to bring that about.
yes, and just like the nature is there for us, like sun, behind the sun there is a spiritual sun. Behind the laws of nature there are spiritual laws. So it's not it's there. We didn't create it. So being in flow with it or being in conflict with it, that's a choice.
Yes, but I think the takeaway is that we don't have to be subjected to the tyranny of the cycles. We have the choice to choose to go towards the light at all times. Therefore, we have existential choice. So we're not subjected to the laws of nature.
Well, we
I'm
are.
not sure if that's a
We have to live within the laws of nature.
We are subject to the laws of nature because they are all there. Whether you go along with it or not is your choice, but nature is not going to change its law. Karma is law. It's nature's law. Whether you abide with it or not is your choice, but you can't change it. The cycle will roll and it will repeat itself in its own time. Whether it is a 5,000 cycle, 2,500 years, 1,000 years, 100 years, that cycle will repeat itself of its own inherent energy, not because of anything else, because that's the law.
Our choice
What
is to
about,
learn,
what about
learn to act.
self-induced and self-devised efforts?
Well, that's what you do with what it is your life, what your life energy is all about. Whether you are going with nature's law or not is, as the speaker said, is in your own hands. You can go along with the wave, which is the current that will carry you forward, or you can go against it, and where would you end up is your choice.
Our choice is act in a universal way or in a selfish way.
I'll give one example that sort of speaks to me on this, that sometimes there is the time to destroy. There are structures that outlive themselves, but we may resist that cycle, say, no, I want to keep this. I want to go on with that. I'm just so much afraid of change. But everything comes to life, everything comes to death. And death to us humans is painful because we don't see it's just a transition and change. So it's just rethinking. We always keep that journey to the light, but on that journey, things will die, and the death to us as human beings will be painful, and death, and not necessarily physical death. Death is ending.
Yes, you have to burn off the dead wood, so to speak.
But it's only the physical body that drops.
Yeah.
The inner entity is timeless. It comes and goes. It comes and goes, which is very unfortunate for the Western world, that this philosophy has been changed to a dogma, and now we only have one life to live, and it really is not one life. It's on a continuum. We come and go, we come and go. So unfortunate for the Western world to think that we're here just one time, because fear comes into it from that.
Yeah.
And even for us who say we come and go, to accept when that end comes is still very difficult.
We generally don't like ends in anything because we're afraid of transitions, of not knowing.
Yeah, and imagine if you are not embedded in this philosophy and you're with that dogma of one life, how that would affect your life. That's why they say don't judge, because we don't know where the other person is. Inherently they're same, but because of the ideas and ideology people hold, their lifestyle is different. But we cannot condemn them or judge them, because you can't strip people's core values. It has to be an internal growth process from inside out. It's not something you put from the outside in. So imagine the difficulty the rest of the world is facing, that do not have any inkling about this philosophy. It's tougher for them, I think.
Yes.
Well, you know, we all intuitively know it, and I think this philosophy, by studying it, it brings it out, what we already know.
Well, I think that's time to close. And again, Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too.